Here's my perspective on AI. AI is either going to be one of the greatest tools that humanity has ever created, or it's going to be one of the greatest idols that we have ever worshiped. And the difference has nothing to do with AI, but it has everything to do with us and how we relate to it. So let me explain. But first of all, a little story. The beginnings of my economic education started in the second grade. When I was about 7 years old, my classmates and I discovered gold in our playground. Not real gold, sand gold. We've had these great big rocks, and when we ground them up with harder rock, it turned into dust that looked like gold. And we were rich, or so we thought. And after a while, something fascinating happened. We divided into two different factions. I can't remember why. Apparently, we had some kind of fight. We went into two different groups. And then it became a race to see which group could create the most gold. Then we realized, wait a minute, those people over there might steal our gold. So we had to have guards. So some of us, instead of creating gold, we had to take turns guarding our gold. Things got intense on that playground. But here's the fascinating thing. The entire gold economy and the entire game and the entire economic system that we had created collapsed the moment that we realized none of us were actually willing to trade any of that gold for an actual thing like a cookie from our own lunch. Nobody was willing to trade their cookie for our gold dust. And that's when we learned something profound. Belief creates economic bubbles that will eventually burst. All in the second grade, we learned this, way before we took advanced economics. But we also learned something else. Some things have genuine value: imagination, friendship, cookies. All right, what does all that have to do with this? That playground economy taught me something that it took me a long time to understand. There are only two paths available to us as humans, and AI is about to amplify whichever one we choose. I have lived on both paths extensively. It took me a while to get off the one path and onto the second path. All right, so let's talk about these two paths. I'm talking about the path of abundance and the path of scarcity. So, abundance is created when humans do three things. They see the abundance that's already there, they enhance that abundance, and then they exchange that abundance. When we do those three things, we see abundance, we enhance abundance, and then we exchange abundance, then we expand what we term the economy. We take what already exists, and that might be our time, it might be our intelligence, it might be our raw materials, it might be our strength, and we transform it into something more useful or more desirable. That is how every advancement in human history has happened. And you can see all the pictures of it in the Garden of Eden. By taking the abundance that was created by the Creator in the Garden of Eden and multiplying it, we are able to create more abundance out of it. And AI is something that has been created out of that abundance, and it is something that has the potential to multiply abundance. It enhances our ability to transform ideas into useful outcomes, which means that AI can be an extraordinary tool, but only if the humans remain the creators, and only if the humans remain the tool users, okay? Now, let's talk about that second path, scarcity. Scarcity expands when humans stop creating. So, this is the second cycle. We see scarcity, we fear the scarcity, We protect the scarcity, and then we expand the scarcity through those actions of fearing it and protecting it. Protection often shows up as rules, regulations, or rationing. And sometimes protection is necessary. The ability to own private property and then to utilize it, that is stored capital, that is stored time, and then we can transform into other things. That is why our ability to protect private property becomes important, because if we do not have the right to possess and we do not have the right to protect, then what's the point of creating more, of entering into abundance mode? All right. So protection is not necessarily a bad thing. That's not what I'm saying here. Sometimes protection is necessary. And sometimes it turns into war, which always destroys vast amounts of raw materials. And more tragically, war destroys human lives in so many ways. This is the tragedy of it, that we go to war over scarce materials and then we destroy even more, we create even more scarcity of materials and human life because of the war. And all of this, if you'll really pay attention to history and its cycles, all of this is coming when humans get trapped in their scarcity thinking. Even all the way back to biblical times. You look at David and Solomon had so much peace in his time because he lived in such an abundance mindset. And he spread abundance through the world and diminished war as a result of it. And also, as a result of diminishing war, he created more abundance. So it was an expansive cycle that we as humans would love to enter into, but somehow have a hard time staying in that cycle. It's almost like we're not used to too much goodness in our lives. All right. But when protection replaces innovation, just like on my playground, protection replaced innovation. So we had to have guards instead of kids creating more gold, even though we were obviously operating in an economic bubble of gold sand. When protection replaces innovation, then scarcity becomes permanent. But so instead of solving the bottleneck, we preserve that bottleneck. This is actually what politics does. This is also protectionism masquerading as capitalism, which, by the way, when people have a problem with capitalism, they usually have a problem with protectionism masquerading as capitalism. So, abundant seeing people solve problems, and scarcity seeing people protect limitations. One of these multiplies, and the other one stabilizes at best, but it cannot expand, and it finally must diminish or destroy because nothing stays static. We're either multiplying, replenishing, and subduing, or we are protecting what little we have, which is being lost to time and entropy. AI will amplify whatever mindset we're going to bring to it. So, AI is going to increase this entropy or increase the possibility of creativity. Just for example, like TV did. TV created this amplification of possibility, as in now we could have movies and now we could have movie stars and people who made lots of money and creators who told stories and people who entertained us. But TV also created way more entropy, as in now we can just Netflix all night long and get nothing done. There is something that we can watch 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and we still would not run out of things to passively consume. So, all of these tools create more creators, like they give more bandwidth to creators, or they tempt us to passive consumption. And it's up to us to preserve our agency and to choose wisely how we are going to interact with these tools. So, the difference between a tool and an idol is our agency. An idol is something created with human hands that we then surrender our agency to. I remember as a kid sitting in church when they were talking about the Ten Commandments and wondering how in the world can somebody, a grown adult, carve an idol out of wood or gold or some other metal and then look to that idol and worship it and think that it was a god, even though he created it. And it never made sense to me until AI came along. And I'm like, ah, this is how. Thousands of years later, we feel like we are so modern. We are so smart. We're more intelligent than our forefathers. And yet we are tempted to the exact same mistakes that they are. To look at this thing that has been fashioned out of human intelligence. It's a bunch of computer parts all put together. And now we're afraid it's going to take over us. I recently visited my family, and the big discussion of topic was data centers coming into the county and whether that was a good thing or a bad thing, and whether there'd be enough electricity, whether there'd be enough water. And the the temptation to be scarcity minded about innovation has always been there. We've always felt like innovation is going to rob us of what we already know. But that's because our imagination is sometimes limited to see what innovation might also bring. And so we have to consciously step out of the temptation to be scarcity minded, step back and say, what is the abundance perspective here? What can I see? Not because those things might not have inherent dangers to them. But if we focus on the dangers, we succumb to the fear, then we can't do anything about it. But when we understand that innovation always has an opportunity to, even in the Garden of Eden, when God was giving instruction to the very first two humans, he says, be fruitful and do multiply, do replenish, do subdue, and have dominion over all the earth, by the way, not over humans. Well, for years, I have been thinking about that. What are we replenishing? And when we're multiplying, what are we replenishing? But multiplication creates a gap in something else, and that has to be replenished. The multiplication of data centers is creating a gap in the electrical grid that has to be replenished. The multiplication of data centers is creating a gap potentially in water resources that has to be replenished. The answer is not to destroy the multiplication. The answer is to respond to the need for replenishment with new imagination and new abundance thinking, which, fascinatingly enough, is what it seems like Elon Musk is doing. If I understand correctly, he's talking about moving some of this stuff to space. So instead of having water to cool the data centers, we have ice cold space. And instead of the electrical grid to power them, then we have the infinite power of the sun. Fascinating what a greater imagination will see when others see just limitations. By the way, I understand that I've probably spoken way past my knowledge on this topic. I am not the expert in AI or economics. I am just trying to reveal the pattern here that how do we know if we're making an idol out about something? Well, I always thought an idol was something that we loved more than God. But I actually realized that was too small of a definition. An idol is actually something that we either love more than God or fear more than God. As in, my fear for years created idols. Fear can create an idol as much as love can. We can worship it or we can fear it. We can worship out of love or we can give up our own agency out of fear. And if we look, probably that is the greater temptation, is to fear something so much that we lose the power to act. That is what fear does when it's very, very strong. It traps us into the belief that we are helpless. And this is the weird tragedy of it. Then we turn ourselves into tools. And I am seeing this on social media over and over and over again. Social media have become platforms where people can amplify fear and turn people themselves into tools, rile them up on a topic, and then employ them to serve their devices. So we are going to see ourselves with our own agency, or we're going to lose our own agency to direct our lives and become tools to somebody else's agenda. This happens in politics. This happens in religious circles. That's how you turn a religion into a cult. I did a video on that. And all of it comes from two different mindsets. We have two different mindsets, two opportunities, two different ways of thinking. For years, I practiced the scarcity thinking, and I was only barely able to keep up, and I was so burdened with worry and so exhausted. And because of that worry and that exhaustion, I could not see the opportunities that surrounded me. And then I learned the truth about be not conformed to this world, but be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God. And so when I stopped allowing the world to conform my thinking and I started actively transforming my mind, transforming my thinking by renewing my mind, by looking for more useful thoughts and asking, does this thought serve me or would a better thought serve me? And once I tested over and over and over again, thoughts of abundance versus my previous thoughts of scarcity, and I saw the fruit of that in my life, and I saw the opportunities that I had been blind to, and I saw that I was not in competition with other people, but I could be in cooperation with them. And I saw that most times the only thing that was limiting me from taking advantage of an opportunity was my own belief in my own limitations instead of just seeing it as an opportunity to gain a new skill. Once I started practicing the principles of abundance, everything in my life changed. I have better relationships. I have more money in the bank. I have more excitement for the future. I have I have everything that could possibly make me content, and also a desire to show up and make a positive difference in the world still. That's what I want for you. That's what I imagine if you've been listening to this video for this long is what you want for yourselves. Let me wrap up with this. So, an idol is something that was created with human hands that we then surrendered our agency. A tool is something created with human hands that expands our agency. AI becomes an idol when humans stop thinking, when they stop creating, and when they stop choosing for themselves and simply consume, which is a high temptation, by the way, once you start using AI. AI remains a tool when we use it to enhance our ability to create value. AI can produce output, and AI can produce a lot of output. But we humans create value by choosing what we're going to value. This is why it's so important for us to remember the value of a human life, to always be elevating the value of a human life, to see every human as unique. I just watched such a powerful documentary about Temple Grandin on Netflix. It's amazing. But at the very, very end, she said something so simple. I wanted my life to count for something. And I think at the end of the day, that's what we all want. We want our life to count for something. AI can help us make that, but not if we get trapped in scarcity thinking, not if we think that our counting has to do with somebody else's diminishing, not if we think that we have nothing of value inherent in ourselves that counts. Your imagination, your creativity, your ability to take the abundance that God has already placed in the world and then do something unique with it, that is how you create something that counts. Only humans can create that type of value because value requires creativity, judgment, usefulness, or beauty, and value requires agency. We get to decide what we value. We get to decide what we want to spend our money on, what we want to give our time and attention and energy to. That is our agency. All right, so the final question is not whether AI will destroy us, and it's not whether AI is going to save us. The question is whether AI becomes an idol or it remains a tool. And that decision belongs entirely to us because abundance has never come from tools alone. It has always come from humans who choose to see the potential, enhance that potential, and build on it. All right. I hope this video has helped you to not be so worried about AI. Be aware of these two cycles, the cycle of thinking through scarcity lens or the cycle of thinking through the abundance lens. Because above all, be careful what you think because your thoughts control your life. Thoughts of scarcity are going to create a scarcity controlled life, and thoughts of abundance will create an abundance controlled life. And that's what I wish for you. And in case we're meeting for the very first time, my name is April Bragg, and I am the Time Rich Woman Coach. I help women in life and business have more time, not by doing more, but by becoming clearer on what matters most. And I have a free tool myself for you. It's called the 1 Minute Decision Filter. And it is 3 simple yet powerful questions that will help you deciding what matters most in under a minute. If you'd like to grab that, it's yours for free. Go to aprilbragg.com/decide. And remember this, your time is your greatest asset. May yours be multiplied to the blessing of you and the benefit of others. I'll talk to you next week. Bye-bye.